As Chancellor of the University of South Carolina Upstate, I'm always honored to be able to identify and acknowledge my team and key members of our cabinet and executive team at the University of South Carolina Upstate. So I'm going to ask them to stand and acknowledge them for their leadership and all that they're doing to make education possible for our youth. Thank you all very much for being here and what you do. So, it is now my privilege to introduce our opening keynote speaker, and we've given her the liberty to have whatever format she chooses, and so we trust her. She's been a friend to USC Upstate and to the Upstate and to all of South Carolina particularly, but we've had her in our classes. We've had her come and speak on many occasions. She and I were joined with at the inauguration of Dr. Larry Miller at Greenville Tech on Friday. Our Lieutenant Governor, Pamela Evette. Lieutenant Governor Evette has been a tireless advocate for workforce development, for entrepreneurship, and women in leadership across South Carolina. Her work reflects a deep understanding that thriving communities depend on strong economies and strong partnerships. So please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette. Please give her a round of applause.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. It is a Monday. We have street lights down. Amazon is having issues. It's definitely a Monday. But it's great to be here for the 3rd Annual Talent Forum. A little bit about me. I spent my entire life on the business side until I became Lieutenant Governor. And so my focus has really been on workforce, on education, on making sure that we not only attract the corporations of tomorrow, but we're here to educate the workforce of tomorrow. And so here in South Carolina, we've really been doing our best to fill gaps that we had. When I became Lieutenant Governor, I was given a very daunting statistic. Here in South Carolina, we were only at 41% of South Carolinians 7 years ago that had secondary degrees and certifications. And where we were going, where businesses were coming into our state, we should have been around 81, 82%. And so the governor and I really were focusing on how do we skill up? How do we skill up South Carolinians? How do we create that workforce? So first and foremost, we started off with the WIN scholarships, making sure and working hard with the General Assembly to have money focused on career options that we knew we were going to be deficient in. And I'm proud to tell you that over the last 7 years, we have educated, we have degreed, we have given certifications to 121,000 South Carolinians through our WIN scholarships. Now, as we were skilling everybody up, and I think a big part of talent that wasn't talked about enough is our young people. You see, as I traveled the state when I first became Lieutenant Governor, businesses were talking to me all the time about soft skills. They would say, Lieutenant Governor, can we not teach soft skills in the classroom? We're getting kids out of college, and they are very talented educationally, but they don't know how to talk to each other. They don't know how to talk to our clients. They don't know how to problem solve. What can we do? Well, then parents were saying to me, Lieutenant Governor, can we not teach fiscal responsibility in the classroom? Because kids just don't seem to understand the value of a dollar. So I was listening. I got a lot of time in the vehicle driving around the state, so I was listening to podcasts, reading a great article out of Wall Street years ago, talking about how youth employment was at the lowest it's been in our nation's history. And I started to think about all the things that I was hearing from South Carolinians. And I was home, I was talking to my husband, David. I said, you know what, David? If we could get our young people just working again, those first-time jobs, we could solve a lot of the problems that businesses and parents are complaining about. So I started a youth workforce initiative because I truly believe you can't teach soft skills in the classroom very effectively, and I don't know how you teach fiscal responsibility to somebody who's never had a job. And so I worked with our Department of Workforce, DO, and we came up with a website, the YES website, our youth employment site, attracting kids to small businesses to get those first jobs. And what I learned as I traveled the state and I talked to companies and I talked to employers who would employ young people is the amount of confidence and the release of anxiety when young people came to work. And across the board, employers would say, when we get a young person in, they're very nervous, they're anxious, they don't know what to do, but have them on the job 30 to 45 days, and they are a totally different worker. And so traveling around the state, really doing a lot to encourage parents to get their kids off the couch, to put down their cell phones, to stop playing on video games and get working. Because see, I believe that when a graduate graduates one of our high schools, they should either be work ready, college ready, or military ready. I think we do a great job getting them college ready and military ready. I think where we have to really focus now is how do we catch those kids who are not thinking they're college bound? How do we start to tell kids, how do we start to tell young adults that learning is lifelong now? If you look at the careers of tomorrow, it's all based on technology, and it's changing every single day. So we can't focus, and we can't let our kids focus. When I went to school, I decided I was going to be an accountant, right? I thought I would be an accountant my entire life, and that's what I would retire doing. But that's not the way it is anymore. We need to let kids know that their opportunities continue to grow if they keep learning. And so getting certification programs embedded into our high schools, because I don't know if you all know this, but I know our educators in the room do, that truancy is probably the biggest problem we have in education today. And if we're only focusing, if our sheer focus in K through 12 is focusing on kids who think that college is their pathway to success, then we're missing them. Here in South Carolina, we are blessed to not just have amazing colleges and universities, we have the best technical college, community college system in the world. And I can say the world because I've been to Germany. I was there 2 years ago on an economic trade mission, and I'm here to tell you I was excited to be there because I thought I would get some tidbit of knowledge that I could bring back here. But what I found was that in Germany, when you talk about mechatronics, they're focusing on mathematics and electronics. Here in South Carolina, we focus on mathematics and robotics. And those students usually have a job by the time they exit their 2-year technical or community college experience. They're making around $50,000, $55,000 a year, and in 3 years, statistically, if they prove to be good workers, they're making 6 figures. We've done a great job in South Carolina about educating parents and guidance counselors that our technical college system is not a second-tier option. It is a pathway to an amazing career choice. Now, when we look at the businesses we want to bring here, we have been laser focused. First and foremost, most of the businesses of tomorrow utilize a lot of energy and water. Here in South Carolina, we have been really focused on the resurrection of VC Summer. Getting VC Summer up and running can open the door to 2, 4, and possibly 6 reactors here in our state. That would get our baseload energy up. It would be a game changer for South Carolina. Also working on our 30-year water plan, making sure that we have the water and resources that it takes to attract in data centers, right? I was in DC 2 weeks ago. We were hearing presentations from both sides talking about data centers. It is really sad to think that data centers have become the boogeyman in the room. When everything we do on our cell phone, every Google, every search relies on a data center somewhere. And as I was hearing about what data centers do and how they become such a great partner to the rural parts of our country, I started to have the wheels in my mind turn about how those things, if South Carolina was positioned properly, we could turn around our rural communities. Because as I was hearing from data center operators, such as Google and Microsoft, they were talking about how they come into rural communities and they help with infrastructure, and they help with education, and they help with rural health care. They want to be a good partner to the areas that they're in. So I want to tell you that there is nothing that's not on the table here in South Carolina. We are looking at energy. We passed an amazing energy bill. Like I said, we're working on water. We're looking at the careers of tomorrow. But I want to leave you with one final thought, and I sometimes am taken back by how South Carolina's fingerprints are all over the globe. Here in South Carolina, right here in the Upstate, we build more BMWs than anywhere in the world. And those are South Carolina's fingerprints. Lockheed Martin, right up here in the Upstate, building the F-16 Block 70s, keeping not just us but our allies safe all over the globe. South Carolina's fingerprints. And I can go on to talk about the 28 boat builders that we have here in South Carolina, or the fact that we're the last glass fiber weaver on American soil. Should we ever lose that company, we would be 100% dependent on China. And that glass fiber weaving goes into every cell phone that's in your hands, every computer, every airplane you fly in. It's amazing. So I will stop there because I could go on and on about how amazing it is to represent the great state of South Carolina. But just know that although South Carolina on a map doesn't look incredibly large, our outreach across the globe is mighty. Thank you all so much. Thank you for having me open up this amazing forum. I hope you have a phenomenal 2 days. And I think I was told when I got out of the car that we were going to open it up for a few questions, if anybody had any questions for me about what was going on around the state.
I will bring the microphone to you.
It's Monday morning. Everybody's like, oh, I haven't even formulated a question yet. I'm just happy I got here.
Thanks for all of your comments. I would ask about the data centers and the energy and water for those. It seems like we are poised for that, but perhaps there's a timeline that is further out than we may need. Can you speak a little bit to the timeline?
Yes. So as VC Summer last year, well, first off, let me back up a little bit more. We passed an energy bill here in South Carolina last year. And part of that was ramping up to get rid of some of the regulations that were in place to get VC Summer back up and going. What we did learn is everything that was built, that was on the ground, is in great shape. Now, I hope we don't have any builders in the audience, but you know, with builders, you can't really lock them down onto how much that will take off of our building timeline. I've heard it could take 3.5, or 4 years off of what a normal build would be. Santee Cooper put out an RFP. I was very excited that the company that built Vogel in Georgia is very excited about coming here and finishing VC Summer. It would be a twin sister to Vogel. And I don't know about y'all, but whether you build a birdhouse or bake a cake, the second time you do it, it's always better, it's quicker. Less problems, right? You've kind of learned from your mistakes, so I'm very excited about their interest. The 30-year water plan, right? We're taking into account the technologies of tomorrow. Well, with innovation and AI and data, we have to. If we, you know, when I understand people's reservations when it comes to data centers and AI and the amount of energy it uses. But that data is either going to be here on our soil or it's going to be somewhere else on somebody else's soil. And I don't think we want it somewhere else. At least I know I don't want my data somewhere else. So saying we can't do it is never an option. Being a business owner for 20 years, I never wanted to hear we can't do it. I always want to hear how can we do it. And with a possible six reactors, our reach would be unlimited, right? Water, it looks really good. We'll know when that plan gets revamped, but we are taking that into control. So when you're looking at if VC Summer started today, it would probably be 6 to 7 years before it could get up. In the meantime, there are all kinds of talk going around DC about independent energy sources and how those become stopgaps to getting that done. I can tell you that with the energy bill we passed last year, we are turning one of our coal plants into a natural gas plant because you need dispatchable energy. And that is going to become a game changer for the PD Horry County area. Because right now they can't build vertical because they don't have enough natural gas to do that. And so we're really happy. And then coming through with President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, you know, there's lots of language that helps Secretary Zeldin help us get transmission across. Because we can generate all we want. But if the federal government holds our feet to the fire and we can't transmit that energy, it really doesn't matter. So our partnership with the federal government and the administration is strong. I've already heard from our energy producers, whether it be Duke, Dominion, or Santee, that they're seeing a loosening on some of that transfer, kind of what handcuffed them over the years. Those regulations are beginning to wane down a little bit to make it easier. So if there was a time, the time is now for South Carolina to really push forward.
Morning. Bridget Kirkland from USC Upstate. My question's piggybacking on what you kind of talked about a little bit, but how is South Carolina safeguarding its energy and water infrastructure from potential cyber attacks?
So here in South Carolina, we have actually done some really creative things with USC Aiken, University of South Carolina, our Department of Defense, and our National Guard, our SC National Guard. And there is a whole hub around Aiken that is really looking on cyber and cyber defense. It's a private-public partnership working to make sure that we keep our infrastructure in place. I mean, I think everybody sees day to day that we're constantly under attack. I think that's why it's so important that cybersecurity is becoming such a big focus, and those are things that we're working at trying to grab the workforce of tomorrow into understanding how important that is. Starting it in our younger grades and talking about it, our technical colleges jumping in as well as our colleges and universities. So not only here in South Carolina, but there is a whole federal initiative through our Department of Defense that is all they do, working on the grid, watching the grid day in, day out, because it is an everyday threat that continues to happen.
Right here. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Might want to test it.
I'm Julie Jones from Johnson Development Associates, and this might be a naive question, but in your opinion, what is the best vehicle to utilize to keep up with the information, accurate information and work that you're doing and others within our system, government system, regarding the strategies for the water as well as power and cybersecurity, all of these things, that to get rid of the noise and cut to the chase. So what sources can we go to, in your opinion, to find that the most accurate information?
So last year, DHEC was divided between health and natural resources. DES is now the new department in state government that handles, they're doing the water study, they're doing the 30-year plan. When talking and hearing about nuclear, that's something that we're talking about. Power SC, that is something that the governor and I spearheaded, because it's going to be almost 3 Christmases ago, we almost had a rolling blackout here in South Carolina. It was what you would call a perfect storm. It was cloudy, it was cold, it was Christmas Day, energy usage was at its peak. And that was our first glimpse at how tight that was getting in our state and in neighboring states, right? Because we all share transmission and we share energy usage at different times. So looking at Power SC, there's always updates on that of what's happening on the nuclear side. And then just kind of looking at what's happening. VC Summer is going to be the nuclear engine to actually bring baseload energy up. So keeping an eye on reports and articles that are coming out about that. You'll see through the Department of Admin when that is literally awarded to someone to start the rebuild.
I just want to reinforce what the Lieutenant Governor said about data centers, particularly local. And then I promise I'm going to ask a talent question. But if you'll remember, Northmark Strategies is building a data center here in Spartanburg County, $2.7 billion investment, second largest investment ever in South Carolina history. And when she talks about these companies investing in our community, they will be the second largest taxpayer in Spartanburg County. I don't think I have to tell you who the first is. But think about how many first responders and teachers can be hired as a result of that project. The other thing, just because there's so much misinformation about that project, and this is a great audience to inform, that data center will not be tapping into our electric grid. In fact, they're going to tap in mainline into a gas line. So no impact on ratepayers, a blend of fans and water to cool the data center, so not the use of water that you've been reading about. So again, this was a project where we were able to prioritize quality and made sure that there wasn't an adverse impact to our community, but a very positive impact to our community. And I think that would be the case across the state. Now for the talent question, child care. Our labor force participation rate isn't what it needs to be here locally, and we know one of the barriers is child care. So we as an organization are going to lean into child care policy this session. We'd just love to know your thoughts on that particular issue.
Yes, that is a great question. When I first became Lieutenant Governor 7 years ago, all anybody talked about was workforce development and how we're going to attract kids into our technical college system and how we're going to let people know that they really needed those certifications. We're still doing all that, but you are absolutely right, Alan. What ended up happening is COVID happened, and then every employer across the state realized that it doesn't really matter what level of education you have or what your skill set is. If you don't have somebody to watch your children, you will not go to work. And so, there have been a lot of creative things right here in your area, public-private partnerships. You have a great company here in Spartanburg that invested heavily into a child care center. You're seeing more and more businesses looking at doing that across the state. The governor and I really focused in on all-day 4K education, using some of our CARES dollars to try to get the word out that if we really want, this could be a two-part issue, solving of a two-part issue. One was how do we get the skills gap between kids that never go to kind of like an educational daycare center and kids whose parents are leaving at home with grandma and aunt, somebody that could be illiterate, right? We were seeing these huge gaps in education. When kids come into kindergarten, they're supposed to be speaking 150,000 words, random words, putting them together in different phrases and sentences, and we were seeing huge gaps in where that was occurring. So we have really done a focus on all-day 4K education, letting that expand through summers, having that going later in the day so parents can use that as a viable option. I've been a huge advocate of First Steps. First Steps does a lot, not just in the public, but the private sector, in charter schools. We are seeing First Steps in technical colleges now. So that when young people or parents that need to go back and up certifications and degrees can head to school, have a quality center for their kids to be in while they're in school, and they continue to move on. So there are a lot of different things happening, but there has to be more. And the first thing we have to do is have business kind of come to the table. That's when you really see innovative things happen, is when businesses come together and work with communities and figure out what the needs are, because every community has a different set of needs. Rural communities get hit the hardest. That's where we enlist those public-private partnerships with our faith-based community, because that's what the governor did when he opened up some of our federal money that we have, is allowed it to go to faith-based churches to open up either First Steps programs within there or all-day 4K programs.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for being here. I'm Gail Owan with the Urban League of the Upstate. And you talked a little bit about youth. You've talked a lot about youth. But I wanted to ask you your thoughts on, certainly we have got great career and college opportunities, the role of our nonprofit community-based partners in helping our young folks access those. Right, if you have any kind of best practices that you've seen, certainly I know here in Spartanburg County, that's one of the things I think they do very, very well, right? Making sure everybody knows where to go to get that opportunity for the job.
And you know, I feel like just when I think I've learned every pathway into a career for young adults or even adults who have been found in a career that's either tailoring off, going away, not getting them to where they want to be in life, I find out about some new opportunity. So here in the Upstate, I was with United Way, and they have a lot of programs, but so does Goodwill. You know, thank you. We must have either a Goodwill or United Way person right here. But I was asked, I went to a Goodwill distribution center. And they wanted me to come in and see, they call it their clean energy program. And what this is an HVAC program. And it doesn't matter what you earn, it doesn't matter your level of education, they will skill you up. Let's say you dropped out of high school, they will skill you up to your GED. And I was seeing one outgoing class of HVAC workers and one new one coming in. And it was amazing to see the age gaps. From 20 years old to 45 years old, these programs are free. It's filling the gaps of resources that we need. And so, you know, sometimes I feel like we do such a great job telling everybody where these programs are, but when I'm out and about talking, people really don't know. It's kind of like the other question saying, like, how do we find out about these things that are going on? How do we find out about what we're doing in energy and water? It's just all of us talking, continuing to talk, not just in rooms that are filled with business people and educators, but at family gatherings, at school gatherings, at church gatherings, about cool programs that we see or hear about as we go on, because you never really know who's listening. And so, like, I was so encouraged by that program to see how it continues to grow and grow. But you are right, our nonprofits, and the governor and I have been saying this since we've been in office, is that here in South Carolina, we have a 6-foot bed and we have a 4-foot blanket. And it's our faith-based communities, our non-for-profits that fill that 2-foot gap with programs and community outreach that we can't possibly do or talk about enough as government.
If elected, during your first year, what will your top 3 priorities be?
Oh, wow. Everybody, that's at least better. Most people ask me like my first one. And I'm like, anybody who's run a company knows you can't laser focus on one thing in the executive branch. You have to keep 20 balls in the air at all times. It would be, first and foremost, getting rid of South Carolina's state tax. Because we have to compete, we're competing with states like Texas and Florida and Tennessee, and I think that becomes a game changer. But going along with that is making sure that we utilize the cabinets that we're on top of to start running efficiently, to make sure that we're leveraging technology and AI to bring efficiency to government, because that's what gets us successful as business owners. You know, I know as my company was growing, my husband and I did huge investments into technology to make sure that our clients felt like they were getting the cutting edge of everything. Government needs to do that too. And when you do that in business, you drive profit to the bottom line. When you do that in government, it means I don't need as many of your tax dollars to be able to run. So those two kind of go hand in hand. Getting rid of regulations. I really believe here in South Carolina, all of our regulations should be sunset and brought back in front of the General Assembly to figure out what is good, what is not. If it's not, get rid of it. If it's too broad and it's allowing bureaucrats within any part of government to make judgment calls, then we need to bring that in. So, I mean, and then continuing on workforce and what we're talking about today, talent. How are we bringing the companies of tomorrow? How are we showcasing South Carolina? We're going to do that by all the things I talked about before, talking about how we're going to run the state a little bit more like a business, how we're going to look at efficiency, and how we're going to embrace with our corporate partners to go where we need to go, working with our universities and our technical colleges to create the workforce they need. Because when I talk to businesses that are coming here from across the country and across the globe, workforce is the #1 thing they talk about. Then we start talking about the port, and then we start talking about infrastructure. But infrastructure is going to have a huge focus this year, whether it's our roads and bridges, or whether it's energy and water. All those things are going to play a big role. And that's why I think being elected, you have to have a big, bold vision. And that vision has to come with state government, working with local government to make sure that we have a roadmap to get where we need to go.
Thank you very much. Is this on? Yeah. I have a question within the context of this forum. This forum, we're focused on the talent gap. And several things that I asked Dr. Cooper, who did some research, will be presenting that research around the 4 big industry, at least 5 large industries in South Carolina: manufacturing, accommodation, and hospitality, et cetera. One of the largest industry, the average wage is under the living wage for people. So when we look at the talent gap and look at the industries and the talent and the skills that are needed, particularly around AI and cybersecurity and all of those type of things, what are your advice to higher education, to business, to industries in those partnerships to prepare our workforce for the next iteration of talent and the gap and skills they need? Walmart CEO recently talked about getting rid of almost 100,000 jobs, but it's going to create, it's 80,000 jobs will be lost over the next several years at Walmart, but it will create, AI will create about 90,000 jobs. So how do we prepare? What are your advice and your expectation for our industries to prepare our workforce for the talent needs of the next iteration of innovation?
I think it's something we've been doing, and we've been going down and looking at our K through 12 programs, right? We have to start educating kids at a much younger age about what the careers of tomorrow are going to be. You know, when 3rd graders come into the Capitol and you ask them what they want to be, they talk to you about being a doctor, a lawyer, a CEO. They don't have any idea of all the other things that are there. And there are states that are doing some really creative things and talking about career paths at very basic young ages in that elementary kind of education to get their minds thinking. I think we have to, as educators and as parents, guide our kids a little bit more on where they need to go, the jobs of the future, and what kind of educational level that takes. I think that we have a lot of universities that come out, and you're hearing more and more of a focus around the country on how do we help guide young people into career paths that will be fruitful for them. And I think something else I talked about is talking about lifelong learning. How do we now let young people know that the more you embrace the fact that you're going to have to continue with education, you're going to have to continue to go and get new certifications. I mean, engineers, computer scientists, they are going back all the time and upping certifications. That is a whole new way of thinking. And it's scary to young people, right? I have a freshman in college who is in the architecture program at Clemson, and you should have seen the look on his face when he realized that the architecture program was 6 years. Like, oh my gosh. That's, you know, when you think about that at 17, when you find out 6 years of your life is going to be dedicated to that, you're thinking, wow, that's like almost half my life in school I'm now going to give to this. Because we weren't really talking about lifelong learning and how that just needs to be an expectation. So I think it's how we have to regroom our kids as they're learning and knowing that that's okay. And then really embracing, again, identifying what are the career choices that they need to go into. And then when it comes to the compensation and living wage, I think a lot of that comes with kind of like where are we competing with, right? We did this with teachers. So when the governor and I took office, South Carolina had the lowest starting teacher salary in the Southeast. And we put a huge concentration on that, saying as a campaign promise that by the time we left office in 2026, our starting teacher salaries would be at $50,000 a year. We, I'm proud to tell you, are at 48.5 right now. The General Assembly has said that they will give us the next increase in in 2026 when we go back and the General Assembly reconvenes. We'll have that. So when we leave office, our starting teacher salary pay will be at $50,000 a year. Now, what the great news about that is that we are now, even at 48.5, higher than North Carolina and Georgia. So we are now not losing our best and brightest to our neighboring states. And I think a lot of that is intentional. We have to look at those gaps and really focus on how do we change that. Because when I first became Lieutenant Governor, Mick Zase, he was a deputy secretary for Betsy DeVos back then. He was a superintendent here in South Carolina in the past. He came to my office, he had a big white binder. And that's always scary when somebody walks in your office with a big white binder, because I'm never sure what I'm getting myself into. But it all boiled down to one thing. In education, he said, never let people fool you, Lieutenant Governor, into thinking that poor kids can't learn. What makes the opportunity for success for any child in the classroom is a good teacher. And that's where our focus came. So I believe that everybody is willing. We've done it with our law enforcement, doing a national study through our Department of Admin to find out where were our law enforcement. Because let me tell you, without good law enforcement, businesses are not going to be looking at our state. You see businesses running out of states that are filled with crime. So we made a very intentional move to say, if you want to be in law enforcement anywhere in the country, we want you to be here. So we want to make sure that you're having a wage. The governor and I giving the largest pay increases to law enforcement in our state's history. So some of these things don't get highlighted like they should, but we are making huge strides in things that we know are going to definitely push us to the next level.
Thank you. We have one additional question for you.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Chantel Greenfield. I work for Spartanburg Regional Healthcare System. And as we talk about the skills gap and we talk about where we're focusing on youth, you know, in the next 5 years, South Carolina is going to be in the top 5 for deficit in nursing, followed by allied health. And as we look at that, how do we really project now? You know, we want to get the youth involved, and we're working very closely with One Spartanburg, all of the colleges in the Upstate, but how do we start solving for that problem? We have whole programs that don't exist in the state of South Carolina for healthcare. How do we attract that bright talent? And as you know, as people come to our state and we have all this industry, they're looking at education, they're looking at safety, and they're looking at healthcare. Yeah. And if we don't have the people in the area to fill those jobs, what are we doing from a state level to help impact what we're already doing on a local level?
Well, I think that's a great question, because you're right. Healthcare, especially rural healthcare, right? When you look at rural healthcare, you really have deficits. You know, our technical college systems have really been able, along with our colleges, sometimes our technical college system and our community college system, I always have to remember to add that here in Spartanburg, because you have the one community college, and it's an amazing one, but you have to add it in. But is they've been expanding those programs to get more and more people in. For a long time, what I was hearing was that it was on the teaching side. You know, nurses were earning so much money that they weren't coming out of practice to go in and teach, so we were getting restrained by the amount of teachers we can attract. But something new that's come up on my radar literally in the last 45 days in talking to nurses, and literally it almost seems like every week, if not every other week, a nurse will come up to me and say, here in South Carolina, we better put some legislation in place to protect our nurses. Because nurses are leaving the industry because of the threat of violence in our emergency rooms. And so if that truly is something that's pulling them out, and I can understand why. I literally had a nurse up in Indian Land tell me that they had somebody come in, said they were going to make news that day, they were sure of it, left the emergency room, and came back. She said, and we were all on pins and needles, not knowing what was going to happen. And I can see that being an issue. So it's something I think you're going to hear talked about in the General Assembly this year, because we definitely don't want to lose talent out of industries that people don't want to go into for the threat of violence. So that is one thing we need to do. Again, we need to just continue to open up programs. I mean, I talked to Dr. Four at Horry Georgetown Tech just a few days ago because I know radiology is a big thing. Well, they only have 26 spots, and it's limited to teaching, right? They don't have enough teachers to continue to teach to open up that program, and I can go on with dental hygienists, right? Dentists have been reaching out to me over the last year saying, we need more dental hygienists. We are opening up those programs, and then again, it's how do you get down? You know, everybody used to think if you could get to your kids in high school, you could tell them about these career opportunities. We know that they are far too gone. I'm a mom of 3. By the time your kids get to high school, they know way more than you, right? They don't even want to talk to you about options. We got to get to these kids in middle school. And that's why, like in Horry County, they have a Pathway to Success Day. Every 8th grader in Horry County goes to their convention center and sees things from medical diagnostic and nursing. Boeing is there, Nucor Steel is there. They have the fire department is set up. You have trucking outfits set up. You have biosciences set up, and these kids get to go around and see all these things. The more things we can put in front of them, the more we can educate parents on where they should be kind of guiding their kids in those career choices based on their strengths, the better off we're going to be. But it's going to take somebody with a big, bold vision that knows how to do it, that knows how to get in and start the movement from the ground level. But there are a lot of things that are going on. And again, if we narrow it down to rural health care, in the One Big Beautiful Bill, there is a lot of money being dispersed from the federal government to state government to really focus on rural health care. And HHS here in South Carolina is doing an awful lot to see how we harness that in and use our local partners to be able to kind of expand their reach in our rural areas. Well, y'all, I think I'm getting the hook, but thank you for having me. This is a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. I hope you have a great rest of today and tomorrow. And again, my door is always open. It's my honor to serve as your Lieutenant Governor. Please feel free to reach out to my office with any concerns, questions, or once in a while tell me what's going on really great in your industry or your community. I love to hear from y'all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Before you go. Megan, I do think that what we have in here qualifies and does not violate any. Okay.
That's the disclaimer. I hope you're all jotting that down now.
So thank you all very much. Let's give our Lieutenant Governor a round of applause again for her work.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Oh, it was wonderful. Thanks so much.
You want to come?
Thank you. Oh, yep. I don't know where my...